welcome to Time Stood Still Gaming. I am the host. Not really the host. I don't like that I said host. When I say host, it's like Stephen Colbert or asking how many people you need a table for. I'm the guy that's making these videos, and my name is Cody. This is the PlayStation Backlog series, where I head back to 1995 and play the best games in the PlayStation catalog. A couple weeks ago, I did a fun video on Twisted Metal. A little bit after that, I did a video on our second game, Gex. Now it's time to do a video on game number 3, which is, that's right, game number 3 is Suikoden. I would say a cult classic in the JRPG arena. I think it's fair to say that. Suikoden was released on December 15th, 1995. This is actually the last game in the first year of the PlayStation 1 life cycle. So in game number 4, we'll be hopping over to 1996. I guess 2-year-old me just wasn't cool enough to ask for this game for Christmas. I was too busy being terrible. So why is Suikoden in the PlayStation Backlog series? I have not played this game before. This game is in the PlayStation Backlog series just because of the reputation it carries with it. I know this game is very popular with hardcore JRPG fans. I would go as far as to say that JRPGs is my favorite genre on the PS1 generation. Possibly in general, but I'm just gonna say for sure on the PS1 generation. So I gotta include the big JRPGs that I didn't play as a kid. In terms of expectations going in, I actually intentionally kept them at nothing. I didn't know anything about how the game plays, the battle system. I didn't know anything about the story. I knew that it was a 1995 JRPG produced by Konami. So we're going in blind, boys. So what I decided to do for this video is to tell the story of Suikoden 1 as if it's a bedtime story. It's long, so it's possible that this will only be appropriate for real hardcore fans of this game. But I liked the story. I liked the pacing of the story. I liked the length of the story. I liked the beats of the story. So I'm gonna tell it by candlelight, beat for beat. Just meant to relax, take it all in, have some fun. Listen to the soundtrack, which is absolutely great. Once I reach the end of this heat number 1, I'll be doing a video where I talk more about my opinions of the games, of the game design, battle systems, soundtracks, all that fun stuff. But for this video, we're gonna light some candles, we're gonna take it easy, and we're gonna listen to a retelling of the story of Suikoden. Enjoy. Our hero of the story, Greg McDowell, joins his father Teo, a high-ranking commander in the Imperial Army, in gaining an audience with the Emperor. The decadent palace presides over the city of Gregminster, the capital and home to our heroes. Teo's history with Emperor Barbarossa is rich, as they mentioned teaming up previously in a battle they call the War of Succession. Emperor Barbarossa has called his comrade Teo to discuss a newly unearthed threat in the north, specifically friction with the United City-States of Joustin. His details are sparse, but he finishes his brief by gifting Teo his renowned sword named Proc and tasks him with defending the border. This, of course, leaves Teo's son Greg without his father, but he is reassured that he will be looked after and commanded by General Craze, as it seems Greg is expected to be a type of aide to the Emperor in his father's absence. During the audience, a mysterious woman with a rather robust presence is also in attendance. Her name is Wendy, the court magician, and she lets loose a quip about our hero's good looks before Greg takes his leave to meet General Craze. General Craze is a dedicated man. Stern and forthright, he assures Greg that he will receive no special treatment simply for being the son of General Teo. After Greg and his father make their way home, we are introduced to Gremio, who seems to be somewhere between a housekeeper and guard for the McDowell family. It seems that loyalty to his work and boss rule over Gremio's disposition. He immediately presents himself as a worrywart, making sure Greg is safe and always has what he needs. He informs Greg that someone named Ted is home, and is looking forward to seeing him congratulate him on his new position. Before meeting with Ted, Greg explores his hometown, running into locals like Lady Sonia. Teo's peer in the leadership of the Imperial Army, Lady Sonia is the commander of the Imperial Navy, as well as a skilled swordswoman and magician. It's clear that Lady Sonia is not at all in accordance with Teo's new placement in the north. After his walk, Greg decides to return to his home and speak with Ted. Ted is Greg's adopted brother. Teo took him in as an orphan child. It's clear that Ted holds a sense of gratitude to the McDowell family, and he confesses to Greg that he would like to join him in his post helping the Emperor. Ted also seems to be tentative to tell Greg an itching secret, but is interrupted by Gremio announcing dinner. At dinner, Teo gives heartfelt thanks to Gremio for all that he has done for his son Greg. Gremio is, of course, humble in his acceptance. Teo wishes his son and Gremio goodbye, and once morning comes, Greg finds that his father has already departed for the north. It is then that we are introduced to two loyal protectors of the McDowell family, Pon and Cleo. Pon, a stern fighter, and Cleo, a more youthful, yet still hard-nosed swordswoman. The two protectors, along with Teo and Gremio, accompany Greg to the palace for his first day of work. The party reports to General Craze, who gives them information on their first assignment from the Emperor. Northeast of Gregminster lies the Magician's Island. Leknot the Seer lives there, Craze explains. Leknot is stationed there to gain information from reading stars, and Greg's job is to go there and retrieve it. Craze has organized transportation for the party. A Dragon Knight from the Knights of the Dragon's Den will be hauling them to the island. By the way, Craze continues, Leknot the Seer is the younger sister of court magician Wendy, so you'd better behave yourselves. The party seems optimistic with their assignment, and happy to be helping the Empire. They meet up with Futch, the aforementioned Dragon Knight, and his dragon, Black. It becomes immediately clear that Ted does not take kindly to the Dragon Knights, and after exchanging some words with Futch, he almost lets slip that he is 300 years of age, but stops himself. Futch loads the party into the basket on his dragon's back and whisks them away to the Magician's Island. Once landed, he lets the party know that they are on their own. Our party traverses the island, braving vicious fights with rabid furs, clawing and lashing away at the monstrous beings, before stumbling upon a young boy named Luke. Beginning as surprised to see visitors on the island, he suddenly calls forth the power of his wind rune and transforms into a powerful golem. Greg and crew take a pounding from the golem, who hurls boulders indiscriminately. Despite the strength of the foe, and Gremio being incapacitated, Pon takes an inhuman strike at the rock beast and slays him at last. Bested and broke, Luke agrees to take the party to see Lady Leknot. Hidden in the heights of a deep blue tower, Lady Leknot greets the heroes and takes the stance of her sister Wendy, calling Greg cute. She agrees to hand over the astral conclusions. While vague, the conclusions see Greg bearing a heavy burden in life, but the astrologist reminds Greg that he is in control of his destiny. Cleo catches Leknot's eye, and she gifts her with a powerful crystal. We will meet again, Lady Leknot finishes. Not that I see our reunion in the stars, it is just my wish. And with that wish, Lady Leknot summons Luke to bring Greg and friends back to the shore of the Magician's Island. The party returns to Gregminster to report to General Craze, and give him the astral conclusions. Craze immediately delivers their next assignment, tasking them with traveling east to a town called Rockland. The instructions are to seek out Grady, the military commander stationed in Rockland, about an overdue tax payment to the Empire. To make sure everything goes smoothly, Kanan, Craze's assistant, accompanies the group on their quest. Before heading east, our band of heroes gears up in Gregminster for the upcoming journey. While the journey to Rockland is brief, it is not without its trials. Greg and crew face off against soldier ants and, yes, more furfurs. The battles prove manageable for our team, and soon they find themselves at the gates of Rockland. What the crew finds is a poor mining town where the people feel forgotten by their imperial leaders. As Greg speaks with the townsfolk, it becomes quite clear that there's a sense of disenfranchisement. We explore the town some before making our way to Commander Grady's house. Grady seems miffed. He shares that a group of bandits has set up camp near Mount Seifu and are pillaging local towns. It's because of this disruption that Grady's tax payment hasn't reached the Empire's troves. Perceiving this as an extra step in their assigned mission, Greg agrees to help Grady take down the bandits and heads off to the mountain. Shortly after arriving at Mount Seifu, after pushing their way through hordes of bandits and wild boars, the party is ambushed by a giant queen ant. Soon, however, each member of the crew, including Pawn, our rugged warrior of the group, admits that they are no match for the creature before them. They toy with the idea of capitulation, but before they can agree, Ted steps in. Greg, everybody, stand back, Ted warns. I have an idea. And with that, Ted steps forward and with a simple motion, sends the vicious queen ant whirling away with some sort of magic. Ted asks not to be bothered with questions looking for an explanation, but rather tells his friends to finish what they came to the mountain to do and head back home. And so, our party pushes onwards. At the peak of Mount Seifu, our band of heroes finds the leaders of this dreaded group of bandits, Varkas and Sidonia. The physical quarrel that ensues proves easy for the crew, with Gremio and Pawn double-teaming the final blow. The bandit leaders are captured by the party, and Assistant Kanan suggests the team head back to Rockland, not only to collect the due taxes, but also because Kanan has a hunch that our party will be greeted with a hero's welcome. After receiving thanks for their efforts from the citizens of Rockland and collecting their cash from Grady, the crew hands the bandit leaders over to the custody of Grady, then heads back to Gregminster. Back in his hometown, Greg is advised to head home and rest, while an eager Kanan quietly leads Ted to the castle. Ted tells Greg not to worry, and that he has something important to tell Greg once he is rested. That night, after sufficient rest, Master McDole wanders through his home after chatting with his protectors, Cleo and Pawn. On the second floor, Greg is absolutely stunned to see the body of Ted lying limp at the entrance. With the help of Gremio, Cleo, and Pawn, Greg is able to carry Ted to his bed, where he quickly stirs awake and recounts what happened to him at the castle. The court magician Windy confronted Ted, declaring that they hadn't seen each other in over 300 years. She demands Ted give her the rune that he carries, the powerful, cursed rune known as Soul Eater. Ted refuses, and to escape what he perceives as a dangerous situation, he uses the power of the rune, damaging himself in the process. Ted confesses that he has possessed the rune and has been trying to avoid capture by Windy for 300 years. She seeks to have its power, the same power that destroyed the Queen Ant in Mount Seifu. Ted gives the cursed rune to Greg, insisting that he must keep it away from Lady Windy. And, as if on cue, Commander Craig barges into the McDole home with Imperial soldiers, demanding Ted be seized. Weakened and outranked, Ted has no choice but to surrender, but not before Greg and his friends escape out the back. They leave the house to find the town soaked by a heavy rain and locked down by Craze and his men, apparently to find the rune. The crew dashes to the inn, and the owner agrees to allow them to stow away in the attic. Against the advice of his friend, Greg decides to wander throughout the inn, and is quickly spotted by Imperial soldiers in the lobby. Just moments away from being questioned and possibly apprehended, Greg is saved by a mysterious man named Victor, who convinces the soldiers that Greg couldn't possibly be the fugitive they are after. Having been deterred for a moment, the soldiers take their leave, and Victor explains that as recompense for being saved, Greg and his friends must travel to a nearby town named Lenin Camp, as there is someone there who he would like them to meet. When the group, now including Victor, completes the short trip to Lenin Camp, Victor goes off on his own, saying that he needs to make arrangements for them all. At the inn, Greg and friends wait for Victor's return well into the night, when suddenly a group of soldiers searching for them arrive. The situation is dire, as there seems to be no escape, until a beautiful, red-headed woman appears from behind the grandfather clock in the group's room. There is a secret staircase hidden behind the clock, and the woman, named Odessa, beckons them to follow her. The party obeys and follows Odessa underground as she mentions that she has been waiting for Greg and his team since Victor had told her about them. We meet up with Odessa in a makeshift boardroom, where she reveals herself to be the leader of a rebel army, formerly known by members as the Liberation Army. Odessa confesses that it was Victor's job to lure the party here to get them to join the ranks of her army, but that she only truly wants them to join of their own will. During the meeting, we also meet Odessa's three right-hand men, Flick, Humphrey, and Sanchez. In a sudden interruption, a bandit from the clan that was wiped out in Mount Seifu enters to beg for leader Odessa's help. His leaders, Varkas and Sidonia, it turns out, have been strung up to starve in the town of Rockland. Direct orders from Commander Grady. Reluctantly, Greg and party confess to being the ones to capture the camp leaders in the first place, and vow to save them from the cruel punishment as a way to redeem themselves. And so, with the blessing of Odessa, they head back to the small town of Rockland. Once there, Victor, who has rejoined the crew, sets fire to Commander Grady's home to create a distraction. Using the cover of smoke and flames, Greg lowers Varkas and Sidonia from their posts, who in their delight of being rescued, mistake the party for working on behalf of the Liberation Army. They vow their loyalty to the rebel army if it should ever need it. The group decides to go back to Lenin Camp to meet Odessa in the hideout. It's clear that our group's loyalty to the empire which they serve is shaken. The pursuit by General Craze, and now the horrendous acts of Commander Grady, give Odessa the chance to finally convince Greg to help the Liberation Army. Loyal Gremio is shaken by Greg's decision to join, but follows his master regardless. Odessa tells the group of a weapons blueprint that her army has managed to receive by way of the dwarves. If the Liberation Army managed to develop one of these weapons, they just may stand a chance against Emperor Barbarossa in the Imperial Army. Northwest of Lenin Camp, across the river, lies Mount Tigerwolf, Odessa's comrade Sanchez explains. Over the mountain is a village called Sarade. Someone from the factory will meet you there. And with that, Odessa joins our party on their mission to deliver the blueprints. Halfway up Tigerwolf, our heroes run into Ledin, a crafty character who invites them into his hut for some respite. The group decides to spend the night, and Ledin offers some hot Mount Tigerwolf tea, which, after drinking and quickly experiencing some frightening side effects, they realize is poisoned. The party collapses onto the floor in agony, and as Ledin begins robbing them, a man named Kessler barges in and demands Ledin make an antidote to wake them. Kessler is a friend of Lady Odessa's and won't stand for Ledin's grifting. Ledin agrees to a free night stay at the inn and the guarantee of a poison-free evening. With that, the group rests, and in the morning, they finish the short trip to the town of Sarade. We're supposed to meet a messenger from the secret factory at an inn in this town, Lady Odessa explains upon arrival. Greg and his entourage quickly settle in. That night, a restless Greg makes his way to the room's balcony for some fresh air. He finds Lady Odessa leaning gently on the stone banister, her eyes looking out in the distance. She confesses her fears to Greg of failure, of scrutiny. Odessa confesses that she feels a certain sense of compassion when she is with Greg, that he may possess the qualities of a great leader. At the height of their intimate conversation, Cage, a hired third-party messenger from the Liberation Army's secret factory, reports. He collects the blueprints for the fire spear, and just as quickly as he arrived, Cage disappears into the night. Back in Lenin camp, our crew retires to the inn, only to find an employee strewn about the floor, murmuring to Odessa that the Imperial Army has raided the inn. Shocked and angry, Odessa beelines to the hidden bunker, pursued worriedly by the party. We find the hideout of the Liberation Army infested with Imperial soldiers, and Greg, Victor, Gremio, and Cleo fight violently to defend their new friend and leader. But, despite their valiant effort, tragedy has already struck. Lady Odessa has already been gravely wounded, and she's aware of it. Knowing that her life is slipping away, Lady Odessa begins making her final wishes and words. First, she tasks Greg with bringing an earring to a fellow named Matthew in a village called Seika. She also asks Greg to dispose of her body in a nearby stream. She offers them kind words, hope, and encouragement before finally Lady Odessa, leader of the Liberation Army, dreamer of the free world, takes her last breath. With low and mournful spirits, the party discusses their next move back at the inn. Cleo points out that to get to the village of Seika mentioned by Odessa, they must pass through the fortress of Quaba, which will be a grand adventure in itself. Upon arriving at Quaba, Cleo doles out some more useful information. The commander of Fortress Quaba is Ain Guide, an old friend of Master Teo's, she explains. At the security checkpoint, it is precisely with the help of Ain Guide that Greg and his friends avoid detection, as Ain seems to lead the conversation away from the hotly pursued fugitives, and with that, the party gains passage through the fortress of Quaba. After arriving in Seika and taking a moment to breathe in the small town air, the crew finds Matthew, a teacher in this quaint town, who simply refuses to accept the earring that Odessa gave to Greg to deliver him. As he bids the party a brisk farewell, Imperial guards storm the town and threaten one of Matthew's students. They demand that Matthew return to the ranks of the Imperial Army, promising a world of hurt and pain if he refuses. The party engages. The brawl with the guards proves simple. A swing and a miss from Victor causes a moment's worry, but a healthy rebound from Greg and Cleo take the last guard out. Matthew thanks the band of heroes for their service and opens up to them some more. Matthew is, in fact, the brother of Lady Odessa and a former guard in the Imperial Army. He now lives in this small town, a pacifist who, having once fought in war for the Imperial Army, has sworn off ever again returning to a life of violence. Feeling unsupported and betrayed, Odessa shunned Matthew for his cowardice. Matthew doesn't rebuke the description. In fact, he goes so far as to once again deny Odessa's earring, claiming that Greg, for all of his bravery and leadership skills, should take it. He even suggests that Greg must carry Odessa's legacy and fill the role as leader of the Liberation Army in her absence. Matthew then suggests, if a resurgence of the Liberation Army is imminent, that they must find a headquarters to base themselves from. He suggests Castle Toran, an abandoned castle that sits at the center of Lake Toron, just west from the small coastal town named Kaku. After doing some shopping and exploring the village, the party heads to Kaku Restaurant and Bar, where they meet a feisty young woman named Camille. It turns out Camille is a debt collector, and Gremio owes on behalf of Greg's father, Master Teo. Victor steps in to settle things, and Camille lets slip that she is acquainted with one Tai Ho, the boatsman of the village. An opportune moment, and Victor seizes it by promising Camille payment so long as she introduces the party to this man Tai Ho. Camille accepts the offer and joins the party to boot, as the bartender informs the group that Tai Ho is just downstairs. An amicable man with a substantial frame, Tai Ho agrees to lend his boating services so long as Greg can beat him in a game of dice. Greg inexplicably wins with a single roll of the dice, and Tai Ho, along with his shady companion Yam Ku, agree to offer their boat to the party as promised. On this sunny day, the group takes their first steps onto the island that houses Castle Toron. Infested with dangerous monsters, Greg is cautious while entering the ancient fortress. They get caught up in tussles with giant snails, but they are, of course, no match for our band of warriors. Once at the top, the party is met with a worthy opponent, a zombie dragon. The beast puts up a fight, pulling our team into what looks like a dangerous black hole, causing massive pain and injury. Despite the challenge, we brave the beast, and Victor takes it out with a mighty final blow. Our band of warriors has conquered the castle, and decides to name it after their fearless leader, Greg. Along with all of his allies that he has hitherto met, Greg settles in at Greg Castle, the new headquarters for the Liberation Army. Soon afterwards, in the midst of their celebration, the Liberation Army is interrupted by a sudden appearance by Lady Leknot, the witch they originally sought out on Magician's Island. Lady Leknot congratulates Greg on seizing his destiny and inspires him to search the islands for more bodies who would boost the ranks of their growing Liberation Army. She also entrusts Luke, the guardian of her island, to join their ranks. Matthew, now comfortable in his role as the army's expert strategist, suggests that Greg and crew head to a town called Koan and seek out a man named LaPont. Once they've reached the town of Koan, the group meets LaPont's aide, Giovanni, at the manor's entrance. He informs them that his master is out and won't be back for days. At the town inn, we meet up with a crafty character by the name of Kryn. Kryn is associated with Master LaPont, and as such, knows he values two things above all else: his wife, Aileen, and his sword, Kirinji. Kryn suggests nabbing his sword in order to get his attention. With the help of Kryn, the party infiltrates the LaPont home through a side window that was left ajar. Our group, which currently consists of Greg, Gremio, Cleo, Victor, and completed by Tai Ho and Camille, is immediately faced with an ambush of powerful robot soldiers. Their skill and power allow them to escape the battle with only minor injuries. Deeper in the LaPont house, we stumble upon a warehouse worker named Rock. He seems eager to ditch his employment, and so with little effort, Greg convinces him to join the ranks of the Liberation Army. It doesn't take long for the group to reach the depths of the manor and steal the great sword Kirinji. Back at the inn, the party encounters an angry LaPont, who has finally emerged in public. Upon hearing the name Matthew, however, LaPont's tone changes. He offers help to anyone in alliance with Matthew, but when offered a place in the ranks of the Liberation Army, he turns it down, telling us that he could never leave his wife behind. Before Greg can persist, Lapointe's aide Giovanni bursts in, claiming that invading Imperial guards have captured his wife Aileen. The party follows close behind Lapointe in his panic and soon finds General Craze raiding Lapointe's home with a group of soldiers. Amongst the soldiers is Pawn, the protector of House McDowell, who stayed behind and pledged loyalty to the Empire. Despite his old views on the Liberation Army, Pawn attacks General Craze, and our band of heroes dispatches the other guards quickly. Lapointe, Aileen, and Pawn all decide to join the cause, and our party agrees to reconvene at Greg Castle. Once returned, the group finds Varkas and Sidonia, the bandit leaders that they had saved, who had heard rumors of the headquarters and sought it out to join them in their fight against the Empire. It's when Varkas asks to speak to Lady Odessa that Matthew takes charge of the conversation and curiously explains to him that Lady Odessa is in the north on a mission. The growing army decides to throw a celebratory banquet to honor their recent successes. During the feast, Greg takes a leisurely stroll through his castle only to be ambushed by a mysterious Imperial ninja, who, after being quickly overpowered by Greg, warns him of Windy and her deadly persistence in pursuing the rune that Greg carries. Pawn and Cleo rush to Greg's aid, but the ninja has already disappeared into the night. Worried for their leader's safety, Gremio and Pawn keep watch over Master Greg's room that night. In the morning, after taking a stroll by the shore, Greg comes across a young elf, strewn across the sand, unconscious. With the help of his friends, they carry the elf to empty quarters in the castle. The elf is a young man named Kirkus, who risked his life swimming to the fortress after hearing rumors that the Liberation Army was using it as its headquarters. He begs the army for their assistance, informing them that the great general of the Imperial Army, Quanda Rossman, is intent on destroying the elfin race. Another example of the Empire's atrocities emboldens our heroes to fight back for justice, but Matthew grounds them, offering a reminder that they are only a small army of a few hundred. He instead suggests accompanying Kirkus to his village to gather intelligence on the situation. With that, Greg and crew agree, and now that Kirkus has joined the party, set off for the village of elves, which lies past the Great Forest. The crew arrives at the Great Forest, where onlooking humans are suspicious of Kirkus's presence. They scurry through the entrance of the forest, which houses a secret, magically protected elfin trail. Kirkus claims that without him by their sides, the humans of the party would be unable to traverse the path. Halfway to the village of the elves, we stumble upon an evacuated kobold village. One kobold named Kuromimi, however, returns to the village, claiming his friends are sick and have been kidnapped. He soon rushes away, all in a tither. The party emerges from the Great Forest and finally reaches the village of the elves, where they find a human woman named Valeria earnestly informing the elfin leadership of General Quanda's vicious plan to burn down their town and the entire forest. Dismissing Valeria's claims, the elves throw her in prison. Upon approaching the leaders ourselves, we learn that Kirkus is the grandson of the village's mayor. His sister Sylvina warns Kirkus that their grandfather is angry that he left the village and is associating with humans. When the village leader learns that his reason for leaving was to seek aid from the humans, Kirkus's grandfather is overcome with rage and orders his grandson and all his accomplices thrown into the prison along with Valeria. In the jail cell, Valeria reveals that she has recently abandoned the Imperial Army after learning that General Quanda Rossman has nearly completed the construction of some sort of super weapon named the Burning Mirror. It is intended for the destruction of elfin civilization, and Valeria is understandably frustrated that her warning fell on deaf ears. Soon enough, Kirkus's sister Sylvina arrives with the key to the cell in hand. She also seems slightly suspicious of his involvement with the humans, but keeps a more open mind about it than their grandfather. Freed and ready to advance, the party agrees to Kirkus's suggestion of paying a visit to the village of the dwarves. The elves share this land with them, and if anyone has more information about the impending threat, it's them. And after making the quick journey through the snowy peaks of Dwarven Trail, our party arrives at the village of the dwarves. Our crew speaks to the chief of the dwarves, who seems doubtful of the fact that Quanda Roseman, a human, will make use of the Burning Mirror. It turns out that the blueprints for the Burning Mirror were kept in a dwarven vault to the north. The chief challenges the party to steal an item, the running water root, which is also kept in the same vault, to prove that their safeguard is penetrable. Our heroes make the quick trip north and are greeted with a fortress of winding corridors, curious switches, and levitating platforms. After carefully navigating these puzzles and easily besting the Crimson Dwarf and Death Machine guards, the crew makes it to the end of the vault and is faced with its final protector, Gigantes. The half-buff elderly man, half-genie monster is a formidable foe, but with our party's battle expertise and the extra strength of Valeria, Gigantes proves to be a relatively brisk fight, with loyal Gremio delivering the killing blow. With their desired item in hand, the heroes make their way back to the village of the dwarves, where, having impressed the chief dwarf with their crafty thievery, the group convinces the chief to build a counter-weapon, which he calls the Firewind Cannon, that could possibly nullify the effects of the Burning Mirror. Having completed their objective, and with the intent of heading back to Great Castle, our crew makes their way back to the Dwarven Trail. En route from the blistery peaks of the trail, Greg and friends are absolutely astonished to see, in the distance, the great forest set aflame. They are too late, and watch, bewildered at the effects of this disastrous weapon. In an absolute panic, the party rushes back to the village of elves to find it in ashes. As Kirkus laments this tragic loss, Gremio concludes that the only way for them to press forward is to defeat Imperial leader Quanda Rossman and destroy the Burning Mirror. Once again crossing west, back through the Great Forest, the party is met by a band of Imperial forces who have been in pursuit of Valeria since she has been named traitor to the Empire. After insisting that Greg continue his cause and destroy the Burning Mirror, Valeria turns herself in to the Imperial soldiers, on the promise that they let Greg and his comrades go. Of course, the Imperial soldiers renege on their promise, and familiar kobold Kuromimi steps in to help the party in their fight against them. Our heroes best the soldiers swiftly, and in a stroke of good luck see Matthew approaching in the distance. He is accompanied by Humphrey and Sanchez, the right-hand men of former leader Odessa. The Imperial soldiers are frightened away by the growing opposition, and Matthew explains that the members of the old Liberation Army are prepared to join Greg's ranks. Not only that, but Kirkus's sister Sylvina reveals herself. She survived the torching of their village, and an astonished Kirkus welcomes her to the Liberation Army. Without delay, Matthew suggests that they initiate an attack on Quanda Roseman, and Greg, convinced the new recruits have sufficiently boosted his forces, agrees. The Liberation Army meets the ranks of Quanda Rossman on his home turf, directly in front of his castle of Panu Yakuta. In the open fields, the armies clash with magic, swords, and bows. Greg makes quick work of Rossman's army and uses the opportunity to storm the castle with his closest allies. The party enters the castle to find that Rossman has readied himself to use the Burning Mirror to turn the tide of battle. As Greg's army begins to scatter, the chief of the dwarves appears and shatters the Burning Mirrors to bits with his promised counterweapon. General Quanda is in disbelief, and the party uses his bewilderment as a chance to storm his fortress and apprehend him. Our party of Victor, Greg, Gremio, the rejoined Valeria, Kirkus, and Kuromimi fight their way through the stone floors of Castle Panu Yakuta until they reach the top, where they are finally face to face with Imperial General Kwanda Rossman. Rossman reveals that his recent powers come from a black room that court magician Wendy gifted him. After taking Rossman's head, Lady Wendy reveals herself, only to insist that Greg's victory is fleeting and he will be defeated in the end. The party returns to Greg Castle for some much needed rest. We fast forward 3 months when leader Greg, safe in his headquarters, is met with a hot-headed Flick. Once Odessa's main advisor, Flick is back to demand information about Odessa. Matthew decides it is time to tell the truth. After hearing of Odessa's death, Flick is enraged and tells the other commanders of the old Liberation Army, Humphrey and Sanchez, to abandon Greg and meet him at an inn in the village of Kaku. Without a second thought, our party sets out for Kaku, where they find Flick reflecting on his situation. While he confesses that he cannot yet accept Greg as the leader of his army, he agrees to bring his men to set up camp in Greg Castle. Victor tries to apologize for Odessa's death, but Flick tells him it's not necessary. Once settled down at the headquarters, Flick opens up about the status of a man named Milik Oppenheimer. He's one of the great Imperial generals and has captured many members of the old Liberation Army in his domain to the west. Matthew agrees that Oppenheimer is the appropriate next target and suggests that they lay siege to the Imperial-held fortress of Garan, a passage that leads to Oppenheimer's domain. Greg agrees, and after hastily slaying the ranks at the fortress of Garan, the Liberation Army is immediately ambushed by General Oppenheimer and his Imperial forces. Milik commands his men to use some sort of poisonous spores on Greg's soldiers, forcing them to retreat. Once they've reached safety, Matthew and Sanchez suggest they send a reconnaissance team to gather intelligence on the enemy threat. Greg settles on a crew of Victor, Flick, Gremio Pon, and Yamku. After exploring the western plains without success, the crew decides to sail farther west in their sailboat, only to be met with a stretch of violent rapids. They head back to the coastal town of Recon, where they seek out the help of locals Jen and Old Camendol, experimenters and inventors who have developed a device that could propel their boat over the rapids. As the party rests at the inn, waiting for their new allies to install the upgrade, Gremio reminisces over a sleeping Greg. He worries that perhaps Greg no longer needs his help. Outfitted with their new boat, the crew heads out to open waters and passes the rapids with ease. On the other side of the strait, they find Liukan's village, a small island where an old man and retired pharmacist, Liukan, has come to shut himself away from society. Recognizing his medical expertise, the group begins questioning him on a possible antidote to the deadly poisonous flowers that Milik Oppenheimer uses. Right on cue, sitting proudly on the back of his dragon, General Oppenheimer arrives. He whisks Liukan away to his guarded prison, named Saunier Prison, and leaves Greg and friends lost and distraught. Matthew suggests to the crew that they forge military documents to gain entrance to Saunier Prison. Our heroes travel to the prison, where Victor confidently presents their falsified documents. They are granted entrance with little trouble. We are faced with the likes of red slimes and nightmares inside Saunier, but the beefed-up crew isn't fazed. They soon find Liukan, locked up and ready to meet his fate, who of course recognizes everyone from their visit to his island. He accepts their aid, and we begin our battle to escape the prison. As they approach the exit, the party is greeted by none other than Milik Oppenheimer. He refuses a duel with swords, but instead produces a bottle of his spores of agony and proceeds to shatter it on the ground. Milik runs from the room, locking the door behind him. Gremio, in a desperate attempt to save his master, uses a lever to open a second door, allowing the rest of his comrades to escape, and then uses the same lever to seal the door behind them, leaving himself trapped in the deadly fumes. As our disillusioned band of heroes stand helplessly by while Gremio loses his life, the spores slowly dissipate from the room. And, after some time, Master Matthew arrives to escort the team to safety. As they prepare to leave the prison, Greg takes a silent moment to say goodbye to his friend and loyal protector. Back at Greg Castle, Greg consults Matthew about initiating an assault on Oppenheimer and his army. Liu Kang has joined the ranks, and Matthew gives the go-ahead on the skirmish. The Liberation Army spars with Imperial forces, fighting bravely and honorably, striking down the enemy forces. Matthew advises Greg to siege the castle immediately and to burn its stash of the poisonous flowers. At the top of the castle, the crew finds a disheartened Milik who can't come to terms with his loss. He admits that he was also given a black rune by Lady Windy to boost his power. Unable to forgive General Oppenheimer for the death of Gremio, Greg decides to execute him, and Camille steps forward gladly to take his head in revenge. Soon, a messenger from the Liberation Army appears to inform Greg of the intelligence received that suggests that General Teo McDowell is en route to attack Greg Castle and lay waste to the Liberation Army. Upon their return to the castle, Matthew and Greg are met with a ninja from the village of Rokaku, who goes by the name of Kasumi. She is there to report a brutal attack on her village by General Teo McDowell and his forces. As one of the only remaining survivors, she asks to join the Liberation Army to aid them in their fight against the Empire. We then receive news that Teo's forces have finally made contact with the shores of Greg Castle. Matthew instructs the troops to engage in a brief skirmish to gauge the strength of the enemy. Despite their best efforts, the Liberation Army is unsuccessful in defeating the Empire's formidable forces, and as our heroic leaders attempt their escape, Pawn offers to stay behind in order to slow down their pursuers. Pawn puts up a valiant fight. Teo, Greg's father and well-trained general of the Imperial Army, strikes swiftly and with great force. His desperate attacks leave Pawn weakened and tired. What Pawn offered his accomplices, it was a noble gesture, but in the end, it cost him his life. Having successfully retreated back to his headquarters, Greg slowly finds rest in the comfort of his bed. Once sleep takes hold of him, however, he is visited again by Lady Leknath. Later consulting with Matthew, Sanchez, and Flick, Greg decides to seek out the factory, to which he had in the past facilitated the delivery of blueprints for a powerful weapon known as the Fire Spear. While the crew of leaders is uncertain whether or not the factory has survived the recent assaults by the Imperial Army, they can see that they have no other choice. After passing through an abandoned village named Kaleka, the party pushes onward, north to the presumed location of the secret factory. After successfully tracking it down, we are introduced to Ronnie Bell and Mose, the two in charge of operations here. They admit to having fire spears ready for use, but lament the fact that without proper boats, it won't be possible to transport them. Tai Ho, who Greg asked to accompany him to the factory, suggests they pay a visit to a friend of his named Kun Ho in the village of Kirov. He may have knowledge that could help them. both Ronnie and Mose join the Liberation Army. A quick stroll south lands the crew in Kirov, and Tai-Ho, calling in an old favor, is quick to receive the proper boats to ship the fire spears back to Greg Castle. Now that our heroes have secured a new, powerful weapon, they feel confident in facing Teo and his forces once again. While the Imperial Army is a massive force, equipped with their new weapon, the party makes quick work of them. However, despite his clear defeat, Greg's father, General Teo, refuses to surrender, instead challenging his son to a duel to the death. It's with careful precision and focused strength that Greg picks away at his father's life and eventually ends the fight successfully. It is then, facing imminent death, that Teo opens up to his son and gives him his blessing. He admits that loyalty comes in many forms and was unable to break the shackles of his lifelong loyalty to the Empire. And it is with that Master Teo, great general of the Imperial Army, takes his last breath. Sometime later, back at Greg Castle, the team talks strategy. Because of their recent losses, the Imperial Army seems to be regrouping their forces back at the capital. This has left many surrounding rural areas unprotected and vulnerable. LaPont and Kasumi mention the region of Lorimar, and that the entrance to it, the fortress of Lorimar, has been left exposed. As the crew arrives to initiate a skirmish, they find the fortress completely abandoned. Matthew suggests that they execute a reconnaissance mission to gather information on the peculiarly empty Imperial stronghold. Greg chooses Victor Flick, Cleo, Camille, and Leocan to be his companions. The entourage makes their entrance into Lorimar territory and soon finds themselves in a small settlement known as the Warriors' Village. A young man named Hicks is with his companion Tengar, begging her not to make a trip outside of the village. Soon, the village leader and Tengar's father, Zorak, appears, scolding Tengar for thinking of venturing out. Apparently, a dangerous vampire by the name of Necklord has been stalking human prey as of late. Victor immediately demands information about Necklord, and Zorak invites the party into his home. Convening as instructed, the heroes listen as Zorak explains the emergence of Necklord. Recently sent to the Lorimar region as an Imperial leader, he quickly used powerful magic to turn his men into bloodthirsty zombies. He's ordered women from the villages be sent to his castle, but being the leader of the Warriors' Village, Zorak has refused to be complacent and sent Tengar. After hearing of the situation, Victor confides in Greg that Necklord was the general that destroyed his own village as a little boy. He misused a powerful rune and adopted vampiric qualities. Victor is eager, yet nervous to finally have the chance to exact his revenge. Rested up and ready to take on the new mission, Greg and crew begin to disembark from Warriors' Village, only to be greeted by Necklord himself at the border of the town. He has come to collect Tengar, but after being met with resistance and a lashing from Victor, who is anxious to taste revenge, Necklord wipes the party out with little effort. Tengar valiantly steps forward and offers to peacefully go with Necklord to prevent injuries to her friends and family. Necklord gladly takes her away, intent on making her his 70th bride, and Hicks promises he will save her from the evil grasp of this vampire. Back in Zorak's home, he tells the party of a temple that sits east of the village, known as the Temple of Klon. It is known to hold a secret, and having no other leads, Greg's party decides to seek it out. They quickly find the Temple of Klon and are met by its priest, Fukien. Fukien makes claims of Greg being the destined leader of the 108 stars of heaven and earth. Victor dismisses his claims as mindless babbling, but Priest Fukien predicted the party's arrival and knows that they seek the way to kill Necklord. He leads them to the mouth of a cave, that he says is known as the Cave of the Past. He warns Greg that he has much to face inside the cave, but that in the end, the way to destroy Necklord will reveal itself. Without hesitation, Greg leads his companions inside. After fighting through hordes of howling banshees, Victor notices a suspended sword in the distance, and suggests that it must be what Priest Fukien sent them to find. Cleo warns Victor not to get too close, and as she does, the sword stirs awake and seems to speak to our group of rebels. An enveloping white light surrounds the crew and ejects them from the cave, transporting them to a quaint town. Bewildered and lost, the crew stumbles upon a young boy named Ted, who very much resembles Greg's adopted brother. After meeting the village leader, who is the boy's grandfather, Lady Windy appears and viciously demands the Soul Eater rune be handed over to her. She is accompanied by Necklord and another man named Uber. Wrangling the young boy to safety, the group watches on as the village chief gifts him with the Soul Eater rune and instructs Greg and his companions to bring him to safety by means of a secret path that leads out of the village. Cleo concludes that this is the moment that Ted had mentioned to them 300 years ago when he was burdened with the cursed rune, and when the endless pursuit by Lady Windy began. Ted's grandfather lures Windy and her entourage out of town, allowing for our heroes to return to the point where they were originally teleported to. Making contact with that point warps them back to the Cave of the Past, and the talking sword reveals itself to be the Star Dragon Sword, capable of killing Necklord and now willing to join them on their cause. With our new weapon in hand, we head back to the warrior's village to find Zorak and his men readying themselves to siege Necklord's castle. Victor tells Zorak of the Star Dragon Sword, and they agree to join forces against the vampire imperial leader. Necklord has sent an invitation to Zorak for the wedding of him and Tengar, an obvious taunt. Now more than emboldened than ever, the army sets out for Necklord's castle. The vicious leader greets the party at the castle gates, challenging them to reach its top floor by sunset, lest Tengar be wed to him for eternity. Young Hicks, enamored by Tengar, insists to join Greg in his ascent. And so, Greg, Hicks, Flix, Cleo, and Camille enter the domains of the evil and terrifying Necklord. The party fights their way through the perilous castle until at last they meet the evil leader in his domain. The fight with Necklord is long and gruesome. After weakening him with his new and effective sword, Victor allows his fellow battlemates to pummel the vampire with their weapons. Necklord retaliates with magical thunder that strikes each party member in a single hit. It's with much thanks to Cleo, the group's healer, that more of our tribe didn't meet brutal and bitter ends. Fittingly, it's a desperate blow from our new friend Hicks that renders Necklord incapacitated. Victor corners the vampire, and, with the help of the Star Dragon Sword, avenges his family and his village by taking Necklord's head. Hicks and Tengar are finally reunited, and it's decided that the team should leave the castle. Zorak and his tribe await the crew at the entrance. Thankful for the safe return of his daughter, Zorak commits himself and his warriors to serve the Liberation Army. Victor, on the other hand, tells Greg that he will be taking a brief leave of absence to return to his home village to notify them of Necklord's death. Back at Greg Castle, the crew talks strategy with Matthew. They conclude that Qasim Hasil, an Imperial commander residing in the north, is an appropriate next target. The only issue is that General Qasim is the leader of over 20,000 troops. Humphrey chimes in and tells us that he is an old acquaintance of Joshua of the Dragon Knights. While the Dragon Knights have notoriously remained neutral in their stance against the Empire, if they were to recruit them, it would boost the forces of the Liberation Army enough to possibly stand a chance against the Imperial ranks. And so, with a party of Flick, Humphrey, Kessler, Kirkus, and Jupo, we make the journey to the den of the Dragon Knights, which sits in the west. Despite their quick arrival, the party is met with a stubborn gatekeeper, who has received direct orders from Joshua to not let a single person enter the den. Our crew decides to head to Ante, the closest town, to settle and gather information. Upon arriving in the village, the party watches on as a man named Vincent de Boule, in the midst of a spat with a shop owner, tells our heroes that he is on his way to the den of the Dragon Knights to hold an audience with the leader, Joshua. Greg pays the angered shopkeep and trails Vincent back to the den's entrance. Once we've arrived, we see Vincent also being denied entrance by the gatekeeper. Vincent eyes the party and leads them over to a statue that stands to the right of the guarded cave mouth. The peculiar man reminisces, telling us of the time he spent playing near the Dragon's Knight's den as a child. He knows of a secret entrance that is covered by the statue. Without hesitation, the party enters. In the depths of the cave, our crew encounters a large cavity where a flock of dragons rest. Upon approaching, they are met with Milia, deputy commander of the Dragon Knights, who, after realizing that they are members of the Liberation Army, agrees to run ahead and inform Joshua of their audience with him. Also accompanying Milia is Fudge, the young Dragon Knight in training that flew Greg and his comrades to the Magician's Island when they were under the command of the Empire. We enter the fortress of the Dragon Knights to speak with Joshua, who recognizes his old friend Humphrey in an instant. He confesses to the party that the dragons they saw in the cave have been asleep for nearly 3 months, and they cannot be awakened. It seems to be some sort of sickness or curse, and Joshua had sent out men to search for Louis-Con for his famed knowledge of medicine. Flick, taking Greg aside, encourages him to bring Louis-Con to Joshua in order to curry favor and perhaps convince Joshua to join the Liberation Army with his knights. Greg brings Master Louis-Con to the Dragon Knight's den and shows him to the resting dragons. Louis-Con confirms that the dragons have been cursed, but that an antidote exists. He simply needs the correct ingredients: moonlight weed, black dragon orchid, and a third ingredient that Louis-Con holds secret. Commander Milia offers to fly Greg and his friends to nearby Seek Valley to find the moonlight weed. With the help of Milia's dragon Thrash, we reach the valley in no time, and quickly locate a bushel of moonlight weed. However, out of thin air, Lady Windy appears with Ted by her side. She demands Greg hand her the Soul Eater rune, and Ted seems to back her up. But in a flash of distorted light, Ted reaches out to Greg and speaks to him privately through their common connection of the rune. Ted is being controlled by Windy's Conqueror rune, he explained, and it is up to him to take care of the situation. He instructs Greg to never let Windy take control of the rune before willing his own soul to be taken by the Soul Eater. An exasperated Windy flees the scene, and Greg kneels by his friend and brother as his life slowly slips away from him. Meanwhile, Having heard from Louis Kahn that the Imperial Gardens in the capital of Gregminster is the only place in which one can obtain Black Dragon Orchid, Futch puts his life at risk grabbing the flower. Emperor Barbarossa himself catches Futch in the act, but admits to feeling generous and lets the young Dragon Knight go. This is not before Lady Windy appears, however, and decides to strike Futch and his dragon Black down from the sky. Futch awakens in the Dragon Knight's fortress, bruised from the fall. His leader Joshua lets him know that his dragon Black did not survive the fall, and that his liver, the third and final ingredient in Louis Kahn's formula, was used to complete the recipe. Lost and without his dragon companion, Futch joins the ranks of the Liberation Army, as does leader Joshua, along with his band of knights. Having completed our objective, we return to Greg Castle, only to be met by our fellow leaders accompanying a silent man who was captured on the shores of the castle by Casimir and Kryn. Upon seeing Greg's face, the man finally speaks. Desperate and panicked, the man explains that he was sent by his master, Master Warren, a wealthy but honorable man who resides in the north. Qasim Hazil, who took over Imperial operations in the north after the death of Teo McDowell, has been launching assaults on rebel factions. Master Warren has been captured along with Victor, who was in the area at the time of the assault. Matthew orders Greg to get some rest, to prepare for their rescue. The next day, Matthew orders the troops of the Liberation Army attack the northern checkpoint, a fortress that is under the command of an imperial leader by the name of Griffith, immediately. With their swelling ranks, the Liberation Army makes quick work of the troops at the northern pass, and Griffith, anxious to save his men's lives as well as his own, surrenders and agrees to help Greg and a small party infiltrate a stronghold by the name of Moravia Castle by pretending to have captured strategist Matthew. Moravia Castle houses the prison that Victor and Master Warren are kept in. The plan works smoothly, and soon Greg, along with a party consisting of Flick, Cleo, Casimir, Kai, and Kryn, are inside the Imperial fortress. Fighting through the hordes of castle guards and resident monsters, the crew quickly makes it to the top of the castle and unleash Victor and Master Warren from their cages. Matthew, now holding an audience with General Qasim Hazil, divulges his master plan. While the Imperial Army was regrouping their troops in the north, Matthew notified the northern city-state of Joustin, long in conflict with the Empire, about the reorganization. Joustin used the opportunity to strike, and right on cue, an informant of Hazil's enters to tell the commander that Joustin's army has just finished wiping out the majority of his troops. With the back against the wall, Imperial Commander Qasim Hazil surrenders to Matthew and to the Liberation Army. With the surrounding territories free of Imperial reign and the ranks of the Liberation Army now comparable to that of the Empire's, the way is clear to attack the capital. Matthew warns that they must first pass through General Sonia Shulin's floating fortress of Shasarazad, but that he will make appropriate arrangements. Familiar members of our grassroots army reflect on the imminent attack on the Imperial Castle. In the morning, Greg discovers that Matthew used the talents of their newly acquired dragon, Thrash, to aid in creating 500 makeshift canoes made of ice. The entirety of the army uses the frozen battalion to sail to their ambush of the floating fortress of Shahrazad. The battle is neither quick nor easy, but in the end, the Liberation Army take down the fortress of General Sonya Shulin and claim the fortress. Matthew briskly instructs Greg to choose a party of companions to travel to the far side of the castle to close the floodgates, as he intends to douse the castle with oil and burn it to the ground. While infiltrating the castle to complete the objective, the party is ambushed by the Imperial commander Sonya Shulin, who prematurely lights the oil and battles them in the heat of the flames. The leader's strength is formidable, and she puts up a respectable fight, but it is no match for our crew. Back outside the castle, it is discovered that Sanchez, former commander alongside Odessa, has been under the employ of the Empire for years. He is the one who lit the fire and admits to being a spy. An infuriated Flick wants to take his head, but Matthew stops him, claiming that it would cause morale to plummet and that their focus should be their attack on the imperial capital of Gregminster. Our leader reconvenes at his headquarters and approaches Matthew to begin the assault. As they are readying themselves for battle, Lady Leknot, sister of Windy, once again appears and offers a rousing speech to the grassroots army. Lady Leknot accompanies the Liberation Army to the battlefront, and after assessing the enemy's ranks and realizing that Windy has conjured up thousands of monsters to boost their power, Leknot immediately dispels them. The Imperial Army doesn't seem phased and orders their soldiers to advance and attack. It's with little struggle that our heroes emerge from the battle with the enemy forces victorious. They take this opportunity to storm the capital of Gregminster and take Emperor Barbarossa's head. Upon entering the capital, Greg and crew are met with Ein Guide, the Imperial general that previously granted our heroes safe passage through the fortress of Quaba after recognizing Master McDole. Despite his friendly gesture in the past, he asserts his loyalty to the Empire, and our party dispatches of him quickly. At the roof of the castle, our heroes are met with a summoned dragon from the Emperor himself. A brutal, dastardly fight ends with a painful final thrust that sends the opponent to its death. Lady Windy appears, swooping in to finally rob Greg of the cursed rune. Despite her best efforts, the rune rejects Windy, and Barbarossa reveals that the great rune that he was gifted with nulls Windy of all her powers in his presence as a form of protection. After confessing his love for Windy, Barbarossa grabs her by the waist and launches both of them from the top of the castle, leaving the party to witness the true end of the evil Imperial reign. Meanwhile, back at Greg Castle, an injured and dying Matthew reflects on his life and decisions while Louis Khan sits by his side. He's despised war his whole life, and yet, here he lies, dying as a war strategist. Perhaps he should have stayed in his village all along. And it is here, against the backdrop of immense relief and victory for the army and for the people, that Matthew takes his last breath.